Minasan, welcome back for another round of MechWarrior BattleTech Research, or BattleTech MechWarrior Research, how's that? We're back to the first session where we're going to look to finish this all off. The final episodes of the first session war from Sven Plank. What an excellent documentary this has been. Now that we got a handle of all the houses, now it's time to see how they all basically come together in the end, in what is now the latter years of the war, where everything is now slowing down. No more mass bombings, no more fleets decimated into oblivion. All but one successor lord dead. It's pretty crazy. You know what I'm saying? It's been a crazy war. So, get your notes together for my post-research thoughts. This is a call to action. Comment, like, subscribe, follow, and hit the notification button. And let us resume the research. Woo, look at all those pillars of the dead. Politics at play.
First Prince Paul Davian had spent the initial 3 years of his reign overhauling his government, his military, and his intelligence networks. The Reformation, as this turbulent time had become known, came to an end in February 2801, after which Davian began making preparations for a serious counteroffensive against the rampaging Draconis Combine. The resurgent armed forces of the Federated Suns had already won a number of minor victories through random strikes along the front, but Paul developed a more cohesive strategy for them to follow. While he would take to the field to inspire his soldiers to greater heroism, command of the actual ground operations mostly fell to his uncle, Thomas Holder Davian. That February, the AFFS left Logandale and headed for their first target, Kintari 4. With them were the 7th Crucis Lancers, who sought to avenge the massacre that had happened on their watch. When they arrived, they found the DCMS garrison in disarray. For the past 4 years, a small guerrilla force left behind during the initial evacuation had been making their lives hell. The arrival of several Davian regiments promptly ended the fighting that April. Reclaiming such a symbolic weld did wonders for Paul's reputation within the Fed Sons. To reward his efforts, the First Prince elevated Colonel Alexander Dressari to the position of Duke of Kintari. On the opposite side of the Ionosphere, the LCAF were again intensifying their raids within the Bolan Thumb, and seized the relatively undefended Hertzberg system in July. The mood along the Kiritan Theatre was decidedly less hopeful, as the Dragon had claimed another 4 systems, and destroyed one of their regiments in the process.
Dang.
The Combine could not celebrate these victories, as the AFFS continued to roll forward throughout the year. Even before Kintari fell, Davian forces moved on to secondary targets in March. The last was secured in November, but by this point another wave had been launched the previous month. Another 6 of their conquests were liberated by year's end. 2802 followed more or less the same pattern. Each victory boosted the morale of the AFFS and damaged that of the DCMS. Jinjiro Kirita resorted to ever more brutal disciplinary actions on his failing commands, but this only cemented their unwillingness to fight. Many officers were so ashamed by how easily they were defeated that they chose to commit seppuku. Those that didn't were interrogated by their captors. Reports from the front were now flowing smoothly back to the Davian intelligence agencies, providing them with further information on Kiritan deployments. This allowed their scarce naval assets to isolate the worlds with the heaviest garrisons and strike where the line was weakest. Another 6 worlds were liberated in 2802, and they were making landfall on 4 more by year's end. The Woodbine operational area was now totally back under their control.
It looks like Kintari was a disaster for them.
The Combine was also suffering attacks from the Capellan Confederation. Ronald was apprised that Liao did not wish to give up so easily, and made several attempts to reclaim it during the first 5 years of the 29th century. They were somewhat troubled to find that elements of the Ariana Grenadiers left behind after their initial loss had come together to form a mercenary battalion fighting for Kirita. The Combine struck back by launching an attack on Lincoln. Elements of the Northwind Highlanders on Weld were still recuperating from repelling a Marek assault on Zion, a battle that saw them destroy rival mercenary regiment Gladstone's Gladiators. Seeing off Damien's destroyers and their regular support proved a greater challenge, one that continued into the new year. In 2802, the Lyrans reclaimed 2 of the systems lost to House Marek during the first years of the war. Both had been heavily scarred by the use of WMDs during the initial invasion. With their loss, the Free World's foothold within the Illyrian province became extremely tenuous. 2802 was also a landmark year for Comstar. In March, they announced that for the first time, the organisation was no longer in the red. Jerome Blake's decision to chase profits had come at the expense of several systems, however. Comstar had prioritised whatever worlds were most likely to bring in revenue, either through their population or their strategic position. Several systems within the former hegemony had been largely abandoned, unable to call in aid or supplies. The periphery especially, whom Blake held personally responsible for the Stalag Civil War, was particularly hard hit. Nevertheless, approximately 40% of the Inner Sphere was now serviced by a Comstar HBG, and the number of hyperpulse generators would continue to grow even as the succession wars raged around them.
Wow. So there'd been a lot of headways over on the Bone Pinky, and Comstar successfully not only got their economy straightened out, but was able to regain some level of influence, especially among, around the periphery. That's pretty. That's a pretty amazing turnaround. More than that, though, Qatari really was a big loss to Kurita. You know, Shinjiro really screwed up on that big time. He screwed up royally, and that allowed, of course, the Federated Sons to swoop in and become big time heroes for Qatari. And to make matters worse, Shinjiro proved to be even a bigger monster to his own people than he was to the people he captured. You know, the planets that his father and him captured in the long run. It's insane. You know, the Shinjiro's losing his mind. Quite feels like he's losing his mind in all this. It's pretty wild when you think about it. You know, like the ravings of a madman kind of thing. You know, I mean, looks from the looks of this so far from the lore masters, Kurita is the central focal point issue. Even though everybody's taking advantage of each other and skirmishing with each other, you know, but Kurita is like the big bad in all this. And everybody is really scooping up and rescuing systems. But I'm kind of wondering if the systems weren't the systems like belong to the other groups. Like, for example, wasn't the ones that the Federated Sons took over, didn't that belong to the Capellans or to House Marek and the Lyrans, and they just went in and took those? They're like, yeah, we're here to liberate you, but you get to be part of us.
The Federated Sons and Lyran Commonwealth were once again the only factions making moves in 2803. The AFFS was still riding the wave, securing their winter conquests and then taking 4 more systems in the summer, before launching yet another pair of invasions by year's end. The Lyran conquests within the Bowl and Thumb that year would prove to be the last of Hasseldorf's private campaign. Significant use of weapons of mass destruction on Malazan meant very few of the FWLM forces on Weld escaped to reinforce their compatriots on a crux. Like Roche before it, the devastation was so great that Steiner ultimately decided the colony was a lost cause, ceding the wasteland back to the League. The defenders on Finsterwalde were quick to resort to the same tactics, only this time the results were far more costly for the LCAF. When the Lyran Guards touched down, they were hit by successive WMD strikes, obliterating the regiment. Worse, the last of the corvettes the Commandant General had access to were hit by aerospace fighter-launched nuclear missiles.
Oh!
With no means to escort his units to their next destination, the Archon ordered Hasseldorf to call off his offensive. For his successes, he was made a Baron of Kaunberg and promoted to General. House Steiner formally declared a victory over the Free Worlds League and considered the Boland Thumb to be reclaimed by the Lyran Commonwealth. The last few Matic holdouts were in an untenable position and would surely wither on the vine. Elsewhere in the realm, the pirates known as Cameron's Curse, once Amaris regulars who had deserted their emperor as Kerensky closed on Terra, accepted a contract with House Steiner as the rebranded Raymond's Redcoats. Turning his attention towards his other opponent, Steiner ordered a raid against the former Terran hegemony provincial capital of Lone Star. Their primary targets were the atmospheric processors that allowed the planet to maintain a breathable atmosphere, themselves only a necessity after an earlier Kiritan bioweapon was unleashed in an effort to make the population capitulate.
Damn.
This led to a terminal environmental collapse, and with civilian jump ships now a rarity, eventually the starvation and death of tens or perhaps even hundreds of millions on world. Elsewhere in the ruins of the hegemony, a Draconis Combine salvage team arrived at the dead world of Inglesmond, tomb to more than 4 billion individuals. Despite Comstar reports that there were no survivors, they were shocked to find that one of the continents housed a large group of survivors, numbering around 1 million. Initial efforts to steal anything of value met with resistance from a battalion of mechs taken from an SLDF supply cache.
This is oh,
as if in rejection of the native population's incredible determination to survive, the Combine again unleashed their strategic arsenal and finished what their predecessors started.
Damn.
One final tragedy in the planet's sad legacy.
Jeez, man. They
On
just don't care
January
about the
19th,
civilians.
2804, Captain General Kenyon Maddock suffered a fatal heart attack. The Freeworlds Parliament called a session to discuss who would become the next Captain General. While the Eagle's campaign against the Capellan Confederation had been fantastically successful, in the last decade of his life, the exhausted military had been unable to make much progress, taking only Christiansand from the Tikhonov Lancers in the previous 3 years. His sole surviving descendant, Thaddeus, had proven himself unable to score many victories against the Lyran Commonwealth. At the time of his father's death, he was busy launching another attack on Alhina. Resolution 288 had given Kenyon supreme authority within the League, but his death meant the Marek family was no longer in control. Thaddeus's campaign on Alhina concluded just 3 days later, at which point he immediately departed for Atreus to stake his claim. Unfortunately, his flagship suffered a jump drive malfunction en route, stranding the Marek at Rasselas until alternate transportation could be found. When he finally made it back to the capital in July, he found Parliament was ready to remove him from power.
Wow.
Thaddeus argued that because his father had never renounced Resolution 288, and since the First Succession War was still raging, the law was clearly still in effect. As his heir, he was entitled to all the powers Kenyon had wielded. The ministers were unconvinced, and 2/3 of them decided to walk out in protest, only to come face to face with a company of loyal Marek battlemechs. With a gun pointed to their head, most returned to their seats in order to affirm Thaddeus as Captain General. The following month, the Grand Duke of Orient Carter Allison and his allies from the Duchy of Orloff arrived on Atreus to have their say. They were vehemently opposed to the blatant political bullying and would not give Thaddeus their support. Maddock had nevertheless achieved sufficient backing to become the new head of state.
Of course, when you have a gun to
His
people's
first
heads.
act was to withdraw the Free Worlds League military from House Allison's territory. The strong alliance that had existed between the two families since the nation's founding more than 5 centuries ago was broken. The Capellan Strategios immediately moved to take advantage of the political infighting within the League. Their shared border had been more or less static for over a decade by this point, but as soon as the FWLM departed, the CCAF swept in to retake 3 of their lost worlds in September. They now prepared for an assault on the provincial capital. Davian's counteroffensive was still going strong in 2804, though progress had somewhat slowed. Between February and December, they liberated only 2 more systems, moving on another pair towards the end of the year. On the other fronts, exhaustion coupled with a lack of transports meant there was very little movement.
Wow, man, Thaddeus Merrick was very bold, and it actually pulled it off. His coup could have failed. Honestly, that was a real coup that he just pulled off. You know, the dissolving parliament and well, not really dissolving parliament, putting the gun to Parliament's head. He's like, do or die, do or die. No, vote or die. Like in that episode of South Park that is like telling Stan, vote or die. What does that mean? Exactly what that means. Vote or die. And start that whole rap song chasing Stan all around. That was Merrick. Merrick and his mechs were chasing those parliamentarians around and told them to vote or die. And they all voted for him to be in. Oh my gosh. Jeez, but that was pretty crazy how that turned out. And on top of that, the mercenaries really just started increasing in numbers. Like they Steiner rounded up some mercenaries and created up the Raymond Redcoats, as he made Hasseldorf the general. It's very there's a lot going on actually. You know, considering the fact that there was so much explosions and destructiveness, you know, in the initial years, there was a heck of a lot. There's been a lot of activity during this you know, leveling off period that Vanderplank is walking us through, and it's pretty fascinating to see how a war like that can do that. You know what I'm saying? That it's now just becoming a way of life rather than you know, something that an event. It's no longer an event. Now it's like a status quo type of thing. And yeah, the fact that Kurita, you know, was dropping bio warfare and then decided to go to that one little pocket of land that contained 1 million people and just wipe them out. It's just normalized, you know what I'm saying? It's not shocking anymore. I mean, it's shocking to me because it's like, really 1 million people. But then this Jinjiro we're talking about here, and it's like, yes, 1 million people. The man is genociding populations at such a horrific scale, you know, and it's very, very difficult to get behind Kurita in any way, shape, or form. Quite honestly, even for gaming, you know, in terms of playing the game itself. No, I wouldn't root for them. I wouldn't even play Kurita. You know, I stand on principle. I mean, I know it's all fiction and everything. Everybody's like, oh, but it's fiction. You know that it's all just fiction. Yeah. But, you know, you got to take into consideration who you're playing as. Sometimes, you want to pretend to be the bad guy and everything, and that's all cool and whatnot. But you got to have some self-awareness here.
In late December, a Capellan task force appeared within the Orient system and began moving towards the capital.
Orient system.
Their objective was to spend a month on the ground, causing as much damage to the planet as they could, then withdraw before the Captain General could send in reinforcements. What little space defenses Carter Allison had left were sent into action, alongside hastily conscripted civilian dropships. Their near-suicidal actions, as well as fire from the anti-capital ship emplacements on the surface, did succeed in destroying a third of the raiders, but enough had made landfall to set ablaze several industrial sites and cities before Colonel Murata called for a retreat off-world. At the time, the survivors of the raid believed that they had only just escaped before Marek could extract retribution, but the Mashkarovka soon realized that the only League redeployments that were taking place in the region were provincial forces moving within the Grand Duchy. The Captain General was far more interested in the Lyran Theatre, which he had been commanding since 2789. In March, he launched an attack on Bela, pushing the Donegal Guards back 2 months later.
Look at the
This was
pinky.
a key part of his strategy to draw the LCAF away from a crux, as the FWLM prepared for a breakout. Ilsa Liao was shocked at how Thaddeus had left his ally out on a limb. With seemingly no help coming to House Allison, she moved to take Fujidera in April,
So
and liberated
she's
a
now
pair
an
of
adult at
systems
this point.
within the salient jutting into the Sana commonality, after which they prepared for a full invasion of Orient. Moretta returned to the enemy capital in June, leading many of the same units into battle. This time, they stayed well out of range of the surface emplacements, instead dispatching commando teams to bring them down so that their warships might move into firing positions overhead. Their plan quickly went awry when a blizzard developed over their intended targets,
Mother
forcing the
Nature.
Liao colonel to rush all of his attacks. Most of the nuclear missile silos were eliminated, but it came at the cost of more than half of his aerospace fighters. With barely any air cover and visibility failing fast, any hope of victory the Capellans had deserted them when an artillery strike hit their command compound, killing Moretta.
Oh!
Through pure luck, Orient was given a reprieve when the invasion's second-in-command called for a withdrawal. In their anger at having failed to take the planet, the Liao corvettes made an attack run on the major cities, bombarding the world before departing back to Confederation space. Millions of Orient citizens had been killed, and Carter Allison was forced to concede defeat.
Wow.
The capture of Fletcher in July made it clear that the Capellans would be returning to finish the job. He departed for Atreus to humbly beg for Thaddeus's help before a third attack on his homeworld could be launched.
Crazy.
Davian's counteroffensive maintained their momentum throughout 2805, liberating 2 worlds between April and December, moving on to another 3 by the end of the year. Among their new targets were Elbar and Cartago, 2 planets that Minoru Kirita had hit in the opening month of the invasion. This next batch of systems was secured early in the following year.
Okay.
Word
Progress.
of Carter Allison's flight from his Grand Duchy reached Ilsa Liao and Thaddeus Marek at the same time. Both began hurried preparations to move forces onto Orient. Predicting that the Duke surely intended to request aid, the Captain General sent a strike force from the Principality of Regulus,
God.
including units from the recently expanded Regulan
How many is
Hussars,
that? 4?
towards Fletcher and Fujidera, but diverted them when he received the news that a Capellan fleet had already arrived at Orient. After dispatching the meager defences at the Zenith on September 18th, the Capellans made landfall on October 6th and promptly set about securing their priority targets. The battle for the capital city began in mid-November, just as the FWLM reinforcements were arriving. The 3 largest Matic warships jumped to a pilot point in orbit above the planet, directly on top of the Liao squadron. Despite their numbers advantage, the Confederation warships were short on tonnage and still bearing scars from the prior battles over Orient. All but one was destroyed at the cost of just a single League cruiser.
Damn.
With complete orbital supremacy established, the League task force began landing on December 18th. 4 mech and 12 conventional regiments spread out across the planet's surface to secure industrial and military targets, then gathered together for
that's
the
what I was
attack
talking
on
about.
the capital. The CCAF had dug in and were not above using tactical nukes to hold off an advance. Most of the city was ruined by the time the last survivors finally surrendered on January 7th.
Damn.
The victory at Orient revitalized the weary Free Worlds League military. In March, they moved to reclaim 4 of the worlds Ilsa had taken in her path towards Orient, driving them off by year's end. Thaddeus's main focus remained the Lyran front, however, and so even before his counterattack against Liao began,
They want to turn
he
that pinky to a
advanced on
thumb.
Radostov in February. The goal was to find the path of least resistance to connect the regiments stranded on a crux with the rest of the realm. With only militia to defend it, Radostov belonged to Marek by May. But the League didn't have much cause to celebrate, as House Steiner had already launched a counterattack on Bela 1 month earlier. This had been one of the Captain General's main objectives in the region, so to take it from him in just 2 months, only a year after his initial victory at Bela, was a major embarrassment. But the Lyran Commonwealth too could not celebrate. The Draconis Combine had been picking at the Commonwealth with frequent low-level raids, identifying targets for swift invasions. In the past 5 years, they had taken Al-Nazal, Orbison, Buckminster, and Vega, the latter two of which would become prefecture capitals in later decades. The cycle of disappointment continued around the Inner Sphere though. They had failed to take Rio from the Capellans and continued to lose ground on their rimward flank. In the same February to May period that Marek took Radostov, the Federated Sons liberated Sholam and Corridon. With these victories, the Federated Sons finally took a 5-month break to move up reinforcements and supplies before moving again in November-December time.
Wow. So the Federated Sons seems like they're coming out winning big in this here. Because the American, the Lyrans were so busy trying to deal with the Bolin Pinky, the Draconis Combine started picking apart on the other end, on the other side. Meanwhile, Capellan is just making headways, systematically taking every single planet. Every single system imaginable from the Capellans, and they finally got that one period they needed, 5 months of rest. That's pretty insane. I see that the tactical nukes were still not thrown off the table after after all that, and still wiping people out. My gosh, man. That Battle of the Orient though was fantastic. Like it looked like 4 houses converged for that. I didn't really get a good clear understanding the significance of Orient, honestly. I'm sure somebody will explain Orient a little better. Like how big was the resources? Was there more Kerensky tech and so on going on over there? I'll have to. I'm gonna need a little clarification on that because I think I might have missed something about the Orient. That big convergence occurred. So yeah. Well, let's conclude this.
2807 saw the final moves of the Davian counteroffensive before they at long last ran out of energy. In January, they launched an assault on the Curitan forces stationed at Evansville, Rowe, and Sun Prairie, as well as against the CCAF occupiers at Castleton. They also set about crushing the pockets of DCMS resistance in their reclaimed territory. Both sides were heavily fatigued, and the ever-decreasing number of jump ships made maintaining an offensive almost impossible. Paul Davian went so far as to issue specific orders to his naval forces not to destroy enemy jump ships unless unavoidable, a state of affairs that remains in place even today, centuries later. With the completion of these campaigns in June, a quiet settled over the Inner Sphere for the rest of the year.
Oh, that was it.
Thank you very much for watching, guys. I'm sorry that this episode got delayed a week. I wish it could have been longer to make that long wait worth it. If you missed the community post I made about it, the reason it got delayed was because I mistakenly deleted some of the math files I needed.
Oh.
We're getting closer and closer to the end of this project now. Only 4 more episodes to go. The next one is the last of the longer 30-minute one. I should say now, there's a good chance that it won't be ready in time for next weekend. Fixing the errors on the maps for this one was a relatively minor task. It only took about an hour. But there is nothing worse than having to force yourself to redo work you've already done.
Yeah.
And what that essentially has meant is
feeling.
that this week I've just done no work on the project whatsoever. It's going to be a bit of a race to try and get the next one out for Saturday. If it looks as if it's going to be delayed another week, I'll make another community post about it. But after that, there's going to be 3 relatively short episodes, and I don't think any of them are going to be particularly time-consuming to make. So what I might end up doing is putting the 2 final chapters out as a kind of 2-part finale on a Saturday-Sunday at the end of November. The next chapter marks the beginning of what is sometimes referred to as the second phase of the war. By this point, all the factions are exhausted and barely able to maintain an offensive. They're still wanting to fight, wanting to wage war on each other, but they're finding it increasingly difficult to do so. So we're not quite at a point where ceasefires are being talked about yet, but we're getting towards it.
Stubborn
There isn't really
fools.
a particular theme to the next one, though it will see the rise of one of the Inner Sphere's most dangerous organizations in ROM, but we'll get to that next time.
ROM.
It'll end up taking us up to, I think it's 2813, at which point the following chapter is going to focus on what's been going on in the periphery over the first 30-odd years of the war.
We're going to get the
We've
periphery.
hardly talked about the periphery at all during this series, which was a deliberate choice on my part. They don't really play much of a part in the First Succession War.
I'm
But
very
they do
excited for
have
that.
their own problems and battles going on in the background, so it's good to focus on them for a little bit and see
I'm down
what's been
for it.
unfolding. Thank you again.
Yeah, that was that's pretty non-political, honestly. Politics at play. Yeah, there was a lot of political moments, but I was expecting a lot more political stuff. Instead, we got a lot more skirmishes. Like one of the most prominent of the politics at play was with House Merrick. When he told Parliament, vote or die. Vote for me or die. Yeah, basically the Federated Sons is coming out the winners in all this. From the looks of it, because they were regaining all of the territories they lost to Kurita, and I think they're getting some more out of it too. Meanwhile, the Bowling Pinky just got even more pinkyish, and Larens is like, "Oh no, we gotta turn that back to a thumb." But they find themselves getting cut off more and more. It's crazy. Oh, did I get that right? Lyrens? No. Oh crap! I think I got it mixed up. No, the Lyrens is like, no, we got to keep cutting it down more. Yeah. I think I got that right. Yeah. Sorry. Correction. I think the Lyrens were the ones that was trying to get it more. Ilsa Liao started making her moves now that she's a grown woman and was crowned. Surprisingly enough, she wasn't coup d'état as a child, and she started making some of her moves. But they've been very quiet. I've noticed that they were very, very quiet in the whole thing, in the grand scheme of things. But I have to say, that must have been very difficult for the lore masters to do the politics while having the war. With so many factions, not just the five houses, but within the five houses themselves. You had the oh crap, what was the name of that alliance? I wrote this down here. Yeah, they broke. Merrick broke the alliance that they had. Oh, well, I forgot. I didn't write their name down. Crap. But you know what I'm talking about. They, after Thaddeus was able to take over, he then broke the alliance that his family had with Allison. There we go. With Allison, since its founding. And so things like that was going on, within. And of course, as we had covered with the Capellans, there was, of course, Ilsa being a child secession lord, growing into adulthood, and of course receiving the crown personally from the regent himself. The fact that he even forfeited. Kurita going mad crazy. It just keeps getting crazier and crazier. And then, of course, was it the League? Comstar was able to get their money in the red. So these little things here to help flesh out. That really takes a lot, and I'm very curious how they were able to manage to track it. Like, did they have like a chart? Did they use a flow chart? Did they use an outline? Did they create? How did they do the timeline and like in bullet point form? I'm very curious about it because because I'm doing the same thing with my novel Trucker no Bouken. I'm doing historical checkpoints because of the significance of what's going on in the plot. for my book, and I want to make, and I'm trying to keep track of where everything is. And I was like, started realizing how off, some of the events that I noted in relation to the characters that I'm following, that you guys are gonna follow when you start reading Truck and Bouken again. If you haven't read the rough draft already, when I released the new draft up on SYOSETSU, I found that certain points of historical periods weren't lining up with where the characters are at in the current time period, the current setting, the current year. So this is actually such a big deal, for me to try and find out what it is that they did. How did they do this? How do they keep track of everything and manage to not let one hiccup? It is kind of a big deal because I'm trying to make Truck and Bouken a very big, not just only a big world build, but a big history build as well. And that's it's a very tough thing to pull off. Quite honestly, it's very tough to pull off. Because I'm just one guy. They got like a whole team to do it, and it's pretty fantastic. Sure. I mean, I could always read Worlds of Wonder by David Gerald. I could always reread it, but doing it is a whole different thing, and that's the key factor about it. So yeah, this was pretty. How you say? Amazing how even though everything slowed down, the devastation and mass destruction and the mass murder just keeps going, and their stubbornness to not want to end the war. They're so stubborn. It's like, why do you want to keep on going? Why do you want to keep this going? You know what I'm saying? You're killing millions of innocent people for no dang reason now at this point. It feels pointless at this point. Like I said, it's coming off more status quo than an event. You know what I'm saying? War is usually treated as an event in history, and instead it's just turning into status quo. I'm kind of wondering if that was the case with the 100 Years War, the actual historical event, war, the 100 Years War. Did that like turn into some kind of status quo type of feeling, like that's the normal way of life and everything? I have to look that up. Nah. So yeah, we're gonna BattleTech is gonna cover the periphery, and we're gonna see what happened out there. That's gonna be very fascinating to see. Very fascinating to see. But and this whole faction here that he mentioned too, Enrom. I'm not sure if I pronouncing that correctly, Emrom or Enrom. I'm probably not, but I'm very curious as to why this faction, he really stressed and emphasized that. That's going to be a very interesting thing to see, to hear about. So, yeah, another good video from Sven Vanderplank. Yeah, be sure to, click on the link down below in the descriptions. And give him the like and everything. Give him all the support. It's a very, very dang good documentary. It's really fun. It's been a fun experience. So yeah, all right. Head on over to Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com and grab yourself a copy of The Impossible Man, a strange fantasy novel written by me. You'll find links to the book down in the description below, along with links to other merch such as pins, stickers, t-shirts, music. Enjoy the products. Thank you for your patronage. And if you have a copy of The Impossible Man and did a lore video on your YouTube channel, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. And if you're interested, you could join me on my live multi-stream on Twitch and Kick every Monday through Thursday, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I do lore research, Japanese cultural studies, gaming, and more. I look forward to hanging out with you. So until the next round of BattleTech Mech Warrior research, thank you all for joining me, and I wish you all a good night. Buenas noches, and oyusuminasai.